You only know the life growing up if you're not exposed to other things. And yeah, involved in, you get caught up in gangs and violence and drugs and all that stuff. You kind of latchkey kid, free range. Parents weren't really that involved or interested. I always say that my parents was like being raised by two sleeping house cats. Like they were around, but they weren't really doing much. Were that interested in what was happening. It was good at first, but then eventually found myself getting sucked back into that same uh, type of lifestyle. I mean, I did music at the time, did hip hop music, and got caught up with these guys. And then hip hop is intrinsically tied with gang life, especially in LA. And I distinctly remember it when we went to a party and one of my boys got shot at the party. And I was like, I just realized, because I mean, growing up, I'd seen so many people killed and, people I love that I'd lost. And I'm like, it's just like, I can't, I'm like, I gotta stop. I gotta get out of it. If this is just, I gotta decide.
Do you remember me? I am the part of you that is wise and alive, that is pure love and beyond your limiting mind. I am the you that is inspired, the you that is creative, the you that has true power. Are you ready to remember you?
Hello, and welcome to Remembering You, the show. I am your host, Elie La Liberté, and I am a published author of 2 spiritual books. And this show is associated with my new book, Letters from You to You, Awaken Your Power Through Conversations with Your Higher Self. This show is about reconnecting to your power, the truth of who you really are. The guests on this show are authentic human beings who have stories to share with us about how they navigated through difficult challenges and illnesses, and also how they uncovered the higher part of themselves. May you feel inspired to go into your own healing journey and remember who you really are. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Remembering You, the show. I am your host, Elie La Liberté, and today we have a really cool guest with us. His name is Deece Casillas, and he is from San Antonio, Texas. So I'm very happy to have you on my show. How are you today, Deece?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. You pronounce my name way better than I would probably pronounce your name. It just rolls off the tongue. So that's French, just le belly. It's like I pronounce it in my tongue and it's not, and then you do. I'm like, those are not even the same words at all.
Yeah, and oh well, I mean, so many people have. It's not that bad actually. There's a lot of people that get it, not that, not that wrong. They say Lalibert, which is not that bad, or
Yeah.
Laliberte is even better, but some people they don't say the yeah, they forget about the E at the end, which is
How do you actually pronounce it?
La Liberté.
La liberté.
Yeah,
Oh,
something like that.
That's close to what to get right now.
Very, very close. That's
Okay.
perfect. So, thank you so much for being on the show. I have spoken with you briefly, but I've got to see that you have been just really busy doing so many things in your life, and you come from a background that was a little bit rougher. And I'd like for you to share your story with us. Just, having gone through a lot of, even like when it comes to school, and I think that we can relate to that as well, where you had maybe a little bit more difficulty back in school. Like I've gone through that as well in my own childhood and even in my teenage years. And so it leaves a mark on us for a long time if we don't do that healing and we don't go and understand our power in there. And so I would love for you to just start from the beginning and just let us know, like, where are you from in that sense, and how did you come to accomplish everything that you've accomplished, and also all of the kind of like the challenges that you probably went through by building yourself something like that. For sure, there's challenges that comes with that, and kind of a healing that has to go around that. So go ahead
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Long Beach, California in the 80s, which is part of South Central LA, which, if anyone is familiar with that, in the 1980s was a nightmare. It was just the height of gang violence and police violence and just a lot of, crack epidemic and stuff like that, which was flooding through South Central LA at the time, which is a really bad time economically in the United States, especially in more impoverished areas. I'm Latino. My Where I grew up was predominantly Latino, Black, and some Filipino, basically. I mean, I really didn't see white people till I was like 14 years old. um and, and it was, yeah, just a really rough time and rough area. And when you grow up in an area like that, you kind of, um, I always hate to say you don't have a choice on what you do, but you don't really know there's other options just because it's just the only thing around, you know. And everything just kind of seems normal. It was good at first, but then eventually found myself getting sucked back into that same uh type of lifestyle. I mean, I did music at the time, did hip hop music, and got caught up with these guys. And then hip hop is intrinsically tied with gang life, especially in LA. And distinctly remember we went to a party and one of my boys got shot at the party. And I was like, I just realized, because I mean, growing up, I'd seen so many people killed and, people I love that I'd lost. And I'm like, I was just like, I can't. I'm like, I gotta stop. I gotta get out of it. If this is just, I gotta decide. This is gonna go down this path and forever be my life unless I make a hard change. So I did. I moved out of Long Beach. I moved just, about 20 miles south to Orange County, which is like a nicer area. Um, and got a job just in sales and slowly started just doing that and started kind of changing my habits. I started listening to different music. I started reading different books, a lot of books on Taoism, Eastern philosophy, started meditating, doing yoga, just anything different than what juxtaposed to what my lifestyle was. Anything that was in my lifestyle, I started eating different. I quit smoking cigarettes. I quit smoking weed. Still drank. Um, Still dabbled in other drugs occasionally, but was slowly getting there.
yeah.
And the it at a certain point, then I kind of fell into this consulting gig I would with a company. Really, I was a friend of mine owned a clothing company. Like they did screen printing and apparel for businesses to do all their any signage or, if some restaurant needs shirts made, anything like that. So they're like, we need someone to sell this to people. Can you do this? So I would go out and get them business. And then they worked at this big office building downtown Long Beach, and it was all high-end clients like doctors, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was at lunch with one of their friends one day, this uh doctor, and he's like, uh no, sorry, it was a lawyer. And he goes, we're trying to get everyone to convert their paper files to digital. And this is how long ago this was.
Yeah.
Early 2000s. And they're like, we need someone who can like sell that to them. And you're really charismatic, would you? I'm like, sure. So I started doing that. And then next thing you know, I was meeting these people and doing then doing like business consulting, marketing, sales consulting, and just kind of eventually had my own company, was able to just be independent. And again, all self-taught, all just kind of, putting myself in scenarios where meeting the right people, taking chances, being willing to just kind of like anything to climb, climb. And it was fine at the time. I liked it enough. It was financially, it was great. I mean, there was a point where I was making more than six figures a year. I was, had a condo in Mexico I'd go down to half the time. It's like, it was great. But it also was not really what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be a writer. I always loved writing and I always loved comedy. I love those two things. I mean, I tell this story a lot, but when I was a kid, my parents used to, like, my mom would just go to bed and my dad would basically sit on the couch and drink until he fell asleep, right? So what I do is I would be laying on the floor of the living room watching TV. And usually if like I was awake, like they'd send my brother and sister to bed at a certain time. But if I would pretend like I fell asleep on the floor. And then they wouldn't wake me up until they were going to go to bed, right? Which would sometimes be like 2 in the morning after they'd pass out and wake back up and be like, oh, I got to go to bed. Let me carry him to bed. But I'd pretend like I fell asleep. Then I'd wait for them to pass out. And then I would stay up and watch TV. And I would watch Saturday Night Live. I would watch The Tonight Show. I would watch these stand-up shows. Like VH1 used to have this stand-up spotlight on Friday nights, and I'd stay up and watch that. Like as a little kid, because I just loved it. And I'm like, well, this is my like tricky workaround to
Yeah.
where I can, I just gotta wait for them to go pass out, and then I like wait it out. I'd have to like pretend like I was asleep on the floor for however long. Um,
It's funny.
and so yeah, I always loved, I mean, really writing was my main thing. I ever since I could put pen to paper, that's all I wanted to do was write. And and I like comedy and I was good at comedy. I was always funny. So, really I'm like, well, I want to start working on that. So I started writing a book. And at kind of around that same time, I was hanging out at this bar in Long Beach doing that used to do open mics. And I was like, and I just hang out to watch, because I like comedy. Like I had no idea what the path to doing it was. I didn't know what the barrier was. As a kid, you see comedians, you're like, I don't know how you even start that. Like where do you start?
Yeah.
Well, I'd hang out afterwards and I talked to the guy who ran the open mic, and he's like, oh, you're funny. He goes, you should try this. You ever thought about trying this? I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I don't know. And he goes, next week when you come, he goes, I'm putting you up. And I'm like, okay. And it really was great because I mean, I had been writing jokes. I mean, I had notebooks full of jokes and things that I would, but I didn't really wrote them down, not really as like thinking I was going to tell them on stage so much as like, I'm going to put these in a book, or I'm going to put these in a script, or these are going to be funny things that are going to happen in a show I write, like a comedy, like a sketch show or a sitcom, things I would, but then I'm like, oh, these can translate with a little massaging, like these can translate to jokes I tell on stage.
Oh,
Uh, and then I started doing that, and then I finished the book, um, and I not long after that I was like doing stand up quite a bit, but then I started getting gigs writing comedy also because I'm like, well, what pays? What writing gigs can I get that pay? And I started getting writing gigs, writing comedy for like sketch stuff, shows, writing for a couple websites, writing comedy articles. Um, and around that time, I moved out of California and I moved to Washington State. And I lived in Washington for about 10 years. And that's where like things really took off for me. I published my book. That sold pretty well for an independently published book. Um, I was getting a lot of writing gigs, but I wasn't doing as much stand up. And then a big club opened up in the area, and I started going there and working for them more. I at that point started this comedy podcast I'd been doing, which I had done for a couple years. And again, I was not tech savvy, but I like now I'm basically a sound engineer. Like I could do anything. I feel like I just bought the equipment and figured out how to wire it all and do it all and upload everything. And
Wow.
now I've been doing it for 10 years and I've done 500 episodes. I had a couple other podcasts I've run. I've done executive produce podcasts for people. Um,
Wow. It's nothing that you would have thought you would have gone into, right? It's just something kind of like you didn't imagine that you were going to even do that. It's so
yeah, I mean, well, I mean, podcast wasn't even an option when I was
cool.
like that didn't even exist.
Mm.
But I always loved, like, I used to listen to, in California, they had these talk radio stations in the morning that were like long form talk radio, not like a couple minutes of talk, then we play some shitty pop songs, then a couple minutes of talk.
Yeah.
It was like long form, like
This episode is
2
brought to you by
to 3 hour
Remembering
shows
You,
with
the
different
coaching
segments and
program.
guests, and it was
As a published author
interesting, but it
of a
was
spiritual
funny, and they had like
self-help
people
book,
who were
it was
humorous
crucial for me
would
to bring
would
to my
host them,
readers
not necessarily
a
like
program
stand-up
that
comics,
would
but
help
like,
them go deeper
you know,
into their
like
emotional healing
Jimmy
and
Kimmel used to
release
host one with
childhood
Adam
trauma.
Carolla, and like these people did, and I'm like,
This
oh,
program
that's interesting. Like
includes
I can do
journaling
that.
therapy,
And then,
soma breathwork, and
I'm
hypnotherapy
funny,
to
and
help
I can
investigate,
talk, I can,
release,
so
and
I would,
reprogram.
I
Go
kind
to
of like, I actually
lettersbyellie.com to
worked
learn more. And
as an
now,
assistant
back
for a
to the
radio
show.
guy in California for a while. But then eventually, yeah, the podcast thing was like an option. So I'm like, I'm just gonna start doing this and figure it out. And I did. And then eventually, yeah, I was doing the stand-up thing took off. Now I've been doing that full time for, oh God, I don't know, 8 years, maybe longer. I've toured across the world. I performed in like I don't know, 7 or 8 different countries, I think. Um, I released a special 2 years ago, year and a half ago, Not Your Cup of Tea. I've I get to do it full time. I've got a production company. We run shows at about 40 venues in 20 states currently. It's just monthly shows where I'm not always at them, but I book them, bring new comics in, headlining comics, give them work. Uh, and then and I love comedy, and comedy's been great. But more recently, I've kind of wanted to spend more time at home. I bought a house in Texas and love it here. And, we've got a little homestead with chickens and garden and orchard, fruit orchard and our dogs. And um, so I just wanted to be at home more. And I've always wanted to get back, do more writing. And I've always loved comic books. So I started finally, I've written a million comic book scripts over the year, but I finally decided I'm going to do one. And I wrote this series, and the art's all done. The first issue is completely done. Um, and the Kickstarter is going live in about 20 days, something like that. But yeah, so now moving into, producing and publishing my own comic books. And when I was a kid, everyone said comedy and comic books were a waste of time, and now I pay my mortgage with it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's really amazing. I feel that you've always had a lot of resilience. I think that probably your background gave you this kind of, resilience already within you with everything that you went through in your life. And you took this as your power in a way. This is what I feel from you with everything that you've accomplished in your life. And I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot of times where it was still difficult to navigate some of it, but I see this as you just went, all in without being so scared because, I feel that that strength within you that it wasn't a question maybe for you to just be able to dive like that because obviously like I said, you've built a lot of resilience and it's like let's
yeah.
go kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, I just learned early and often that like I didn't have a lot of like a structure to fall back on.
Yeah.
So it was resiliency, believing in myself and knowing that I could handle it. So that really gave me a lot of, yeah, moving forward, just knowing that, I mean, the things that I've done or happened in my life, I mean, I've been had cops beat the shit out of me. I had people put guns to my head. I'm like, I'm not, I'm not that scared of like trying to publish my own comic book. Like that's not scary at all. And that the scarier part to me is not trying to do it, is thinking that like I wanted to do this my whole life and I never took the plunge. You know, that's scarier than not than potentially failing at it. It's like I always say bet on yourself and go for it. What's the worst thing that can happen? You know, it's like you'll, especially if you put yourself in a corner, you'll find a way to get out of it. Like people are more resilient and have more fight in them than they think.
I think, yeah, for sure. Wow, that's unbelievable. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this story with me. It's very inspiring. It's yeah, I see, like I said, I see that strength and that resilience, and that I think that people will be able to relate to that. So wonderful. So what I do usually near the end of my show is that I ask all of my guests to choose a number between 1 and 21 related to my book, where I have 21 letters and they all have some themes. And I just want to have your perspective on one of the themes that we're going to pull out. And it's a surprise because you have no idea.
All right.
So, what number will you like to choose?
I'm gonna say 4.
4. Okay. I don't know my letters by heart, and I say that in all of my episodes, but at one point I will. Oh, cool. Okay. So, letter number 4 is called The Art of Detachment. So,
Mm,
this letter is all about, yeah, just learning to detach from things, to detach from certain, situations, circumstances, people, and not in a way that you're not loving, but to be able to actually learn how to, free yourself from that. Sometimes, attachment is really not love, and it's not. It becomes an obsession, whether
yeah.
it's attachment to people, attachment to your possessions or whatever you're acquiring, or even identifying with what you're doing and everything. So how do you relate to this topic if I talk about that?
Oh man, well, probably have had to work on attachment more than detachment in my life. I'm probably my default setting for most of my life has probably been detachment, because I was always in this frame of mind where like again it has probably goes back to resiliency and stuff, but like I always knew I could depend on myself. Whereas like attaching to other people was never reliable. Um, and it was always very easy to, not that I never, I mean, I've got great friends and family that I love, but I always was kind of really good at reading people and knowing what the terms of our relationship is going to be very quickly, you know? So there's people you meet where I'm like, oh, I think we're going to be good friends and that will happen. And then there's people where you're like, I can be an associate with you, but I also quickly understand that like we're going to have this arm's length relationship where you're not really going to be intimate in my life as a person. And I don't mean intimate is just they're not going to know me like others might. So, um, yeah, there's certainly time, getting detachment is can be bad when it's too detached, but you want to be able to also detach from things that aren't healthy and aren't good for you. And it's another cliche thing that people who've listened to me enough times, which I assume all your listeners are big fans of me. So, yeah, the there's this movie called The Curious Case of Benjamin Buttons. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
With Brad Pitt and stuff. Great movie. Love that movie. So there's this scene in the end of it when like he's aging, getting younger, and the girl he loves is getting older, and there's like this montage of that, and she's dying, and he's going through life and doing all this stuff. He's on a motorcycle in Thailand. He's swimming the Great Barrier Reef, wrestling orcas, whatever the hell he's doing. And it's like there's this monologue as he's talking. He's like, you're never too old. There's always time to pivot, to change and try something new. And I think that's really something that a lot of people miss in life. They become too attached to just their. I think they're not attached to things. They're attached to their comfort,
Yeah.
and they're attached to just normalcy, what feels like day to day. Like doing anything out of your comfort zone is really difficult for people because it's hard and it's scary. It's easier to just sit back and say, well, this is what I do. That seems big. If I don't do it, I don't have to say I failed at it, and I can blame
Yeah.
extenuating circumstances as to why I'm not doing it.
Mhm.
And most people probably just nod their head and agree because they're also hiding from life in the same way. Um, Instead of just taking the plunge. So yeah,
Awesome.
I don't know if that answers the
Yeah,
detachment question at
it did. I
all.
actually love your answer. It was really, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, so thank you. I would love for you to just share with us quickly, and we're going to be putting this in the description as well, but I'd love for you to just share with us, like, how can people find you? What are your social media things and everything?
Yeah. So two separate things. My comedy is you can follow me at deececomedy.com or Instagram at deece.comedy. All my stuff's on there. I just released a special recently, like I said, Not Your Cup of Tea. It's available for sale on my website. You can name the price and you get to get an hour of my comedy forever. You can pay $1, $5, $10, whatever you want, and you'll get, it's all donation only. You get the whole hour. Filmed it at my second favorite comedy club in the world, Last Best Comedy Club in Bozeman, Montana. Shout out to them.
Nice.
Uh, so yeah, follow me there. Check out what I'm doing. I'm touring all over. So yeah. And also my comic book, that's the big thing that's coming out that I really want to push. It's called Kill Stan. The Kickstarter goes live on September 15th. You can follow us at inferno.earth, and it's inferno.earth across the board. The website's inferno.earth. There's no .com. .earth is the domain now because there's a million of them.
Yeah.
So Inferno.earth website, Inferno.earth Instagram, Inferno.earth on Facebook, and follow the Kickstarter page. It's the pre-launch page is up now, so if you follow it, you'll get updates on everything going on. Even if you can't support the campaign financially when it launches, just having followers on the Instagram and Facebook helps a ton for the algorithm. Having people follow the pre-launch page on Kickstarter helps a ton. But if you like this show and like the themes of this show, I think you'll love the comic book. It's very much about the human condition, what people go through when they've lost everything, the depths we sink to in discovering what actually means the most to you in life. So it's through the prism of a vigilante, but it definitely it's definitely not about that. It's a very human story about personal, personal feelings that people go through every day.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for explaining that and making that, pushing that, because people need this right now in the world. And sometimes through creativity like that with comic books, and through books, it's like the best way to just reconnect to who you are. So I'm very
Yeah,
thankful.
it's more digestible
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
than a therapist telling you
Yep.
you need to love your mom.
Yeah. Great way of putting it. Well, thank you so much, Deece, and I wish you all the best with the rest of your things, and thank you for inspiring us today.
Yeah,
We'll,
thanks for
we'll
having me. I
put
appreciate
everything
it.
there in the description as well, so that people can find you easily.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.